Hello everybody. Welcome to this webinar on recovery. I'm Hélène Campourcy, founder and CEO of Innov. Innov is an association which gather women and men innovators. Our mission is to support innovation, women entrepreneurship, and allow each of us to better understand innovation and diversity. Our ambition is, in fact, to explain, to illustrate, share expertise and experience, and animate through a concrete workshop with a maker spirit to be able to apply what we share in our companies. So if you want more information about Innov, the best way is to connect on our website. You will see what we have done, who we are, and if you want to join us, you will see all the process. So today I'm really pleased to welcome Nikki Combs. Nikki will present herself in a couple of minutes. She has already shared with us a webinar on risk management. You can upload the presentation and see and listen the webinar on our website. Today, we're going to speak about recovery management, and we will host discussion about different recovery strategy and options. What kind of innovation options should you be looking for, and what should risk management look like? So, Nikki, thank you again for your time. Thank you again for sharing your expertise on this topic. So I'll let you present you, and we can start the presentation. Thank you very much again.
Great. So first of all, thank you so much, Hélène and Veronique and Lou, for the wonderful opportunity to cooperate. It's really wonderful cooperating with you. And just to share with everyone, I don't know if you've seen the last webinar. What I actually prepared the webinar initially. I was asked to prepare some materials for Israel's Emergency Readiness Center, and that was like 2 to 3 months ago, or even before we even thought about this crisis. And when we talked with Hélène and Lou, then we said, why don't we? It's very innovative, because what I do is actually risk management innovation. Anything that's kind of innovative in risk management, that's my sweet spot. So we thought, why don't we present it in the Innov framework? And then when we discussed it, we said, well, what about recovery? So we thought people involved in Innov, with your innovation experience and maker spirit, maybe we'll come up with something innovative to share with the world and kind of help our fellow man. So that's a big aspiration, but you know, sometimes things happen. So I'm sure there are lots of recovery webinars and lots of recovery strategy sessions going on right now, and all are wonderful. So let's get started. And just a few housekeeping rules. This is not going to be a traditional webinar when I'm just talking. I'm going to pause in the middle, and we're going to talk a little, and then we're going to talk at the end. And hopefully, my goal is to put together a short summary of what we are talking about here and your wonderful insights, because we're all from different places, different countries. We're experiencing this crisis a little different. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a collective kind of understanding to share with others? So just a little bit about myself. I do all things risk. A lot of people ask me, well, you do one thing in risk management. Well, no, I do a lot of risk management in different domains, all the way from country to companies to I'm starting to work on a very exciting initiative on personal risk management. So it's all the way through different sectors. My background's in engineering. That was my first love. And then I started doing other things. So very interesting stuff. Uncertainty is pretty much my life. So let's get started. Well, I'm trying to get started. Okay, so just a little recap of what we talked about in the last webinar. What I did in the last webinar is I introduced what I call the sweet spot, and that's basically what I do, is I try to find that very narrow, sometimes frustrating point of success, which is the intersection in risk management of when we do our data analysis correctly, when we have our processes aligned, and when we don't ignore biases and our people skills. And that's the sweet spot. So hopefully our sweet spot's going to get us through recovery. That's what we're going to try to aim for. So I'm just going to pull up a few slides from the webinar, because this is actually going to help some of my claims during this session. So what I had was this slide, which kind of shows how the world has become risk averse since 1946. This is the battle-related deaths by states in state-based conflicts since 1946, and you can see that it's on the decline. And I could have pulled up another slide about basically anything, and it would look basically pretty much the same. So we become risk averse, and it's something to think about. We become so risk averse that, and I will explain this very strange claim I'm going to make later on, that we took on a lot of risks in trying to de-risk ourselves so much. So the phenomena we discussed last time were nonlinear behavior, and we discussed if probability matters in extreme events, common biases, emerging risk, wrong and right way risks, anti-fragility, and strategic dominance. Now, I'm claiming that the same things we looked at for risk management in extreme conditions might be very interesting when we are looking for strategies for recovery. That's something to consider, and I will make that claim and kind of explain later on. So setting the scene for our discussion. This is going to be a little much of, I would say, kind of a depressing slide, so don't worry about it. We're going to get through it together. But one of the things we're finding out is that this crisis is nothing like the 2008 financial crisis when it comes to financial. Because what happened in 2008, it was strictly a systemic financial crisis that was all based, originated by some decisions and processes in the financial industry, and that's why it was a financial crisis. So there's good news. In 2020, our financial ecosystem is better. I'm not just saying that. There's lots of data to support it. So we've done a lot of things right. That's the good news. So the bad news is that this crisis is all about the business ecosystem and our personal ecosystem and our countries. So this is real. This has ground roots in reality. So this is going to be a little different for companies and eventually in financial markets. We've seen it. When has oil ever been a negative price? That's absolutely crazy. So the reason for that is our financial markets were so advanced in supporting the energy market that it kind of lost touch with reality being so sophisticated. So another bad news is countries pretty much used their arsenals in the past few years just to keep on going. I'll give you an example from your personal finances. Let's say you're living in a house, and in normal times, you got a job, you got everything just right, but you're barely making the mortgage payments. You're having to borrow money from somebody, from the bank, from a family member. Not a lot of money, but you're having to borrow money every month just to keep up. And you're doing well. You're thinking, well, you know, sometimes down the line I'll get it fixed. but then a crisis happens and you lose your job, and then you can't handle the crisis. So this is what happened. Countries were just to keep, there's an axiom, you know, in the market that says you have to keep on growing. So what they did, they played a lot of their cards just to keep on growing, just to make that claim real to you. If in 2008, in lending, I'm talking institutional lending, was to pretty high rated companies, what they started doing is they built a lot of systems and ways to lend to companies who are not as strong financially, and they weren't doing anything wrong. They were just fine. They were doing great when it came to risk management. They were managing their financial risks perfectly for us, which is great. But the problem is that beyond a certain threshold, you can't lend to companies who are going to go bankrupt. So they pretty much are at the brinks of not lending to a lot of companies from now on. So in the best case scenario, this is a liquidity crisis that might self-heal with some government help, but there will be victims. So what we're talking about, we're hoping for the best case scenario, not sure that it will be, and thinking how we can adjust or to even the best case scenario, not be the victim. So hopefully you're not too down because of the last slide, because it's kind of depressing, but not really. This is life. We gotta recover. So 3 levels of recovery, and I'll tell you why I put this slide together, because what happened in this crisis happened at the country or global level. So we're all of a sudden having to face, first of all, a personal recovery scenario that we have to go through. Certainly corporate, for our jobs or business, if we're self-employed, or if we work for companies. So I'll start with the country level, and then we'll stop and pause and talk about each level, and I'll tell you why I didn't put anything down under corporate, because we're going to discuss corporate at great length and the strategies for corporate. Let's talk country a little bit. Maybe we handled it perfectly, and I have to say women are getting really good scores right now from everybody saying that women heads of state did a wonderful job, did better, performed better than men. So definitely for Pink Innov, that's good news. But so maybe there was the largest groupthink exercise ever in the world. Countries pretty much chose same strategies or aligned, sometimes maybe a month or 2 later. So maybe there was a big groupthink, not being a conspiracy theorist or anything, but maybe it's the largest groupthink exercise we've ever been through. I don't know if it's yes or no. It's a judgment call. But what I'm saying is right now, on a country level, we got to collaborate and cooperate, but a little bit go our separate ways. Meaning what's right for one country is not necessarily right for another. So we have to kind of think about that in our recovery. We are going to have to think a lot about local versus global on country level. They're even talking right now, okay, there's going to be a vaccine. Are countries going to just let others, get a hand on that vaccine, or are they going to vaccinate their own citizens? So local, global for farming or produce. And so it's going to be very interesting, that aspect of recovery that has to be thought of. And so each country is pretty much going to have to play its hand and its strengths and help others, of course, but not fall into the trap of doing what others are doing. That's the country level. Corporate, we're going to discuss at length. But let's do a little bit about personal, then let's open the discussion a little bit just about this slide, and then I'll do corporate. For personal, there are a lot of decisions that we have to make right now for health and safety. First of all, there are guidelines that our countries have issued, and we're following the guidelines, but there is some leeway. Do I go to the supermarket? Do I order groceries? So it's going to be the same thing for recovery. How fast am I going to recover? Am I going to the office tomorrow morning? Am I going to the office just a few months from now? Um, how was I doing on my job and finances? Did I find myself that maybe my job was not as secure as I thought, or was I not financially stable enough? Do I have to recover in that sense? What do I have to do in that sense? Um, what about my family and friends, my ecosystem, and what's my role in society? So recovery, there's the personal, corporate, and country. And I would be very glad if we could open up, just say your name, and if you don't talk about corporate, we're going to talk about corporate pretty soon, but kind of share your thoughts about country and personal recovery. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So who goes first?
You have to unmute yourself or raise your hand, whatever you choose. Any thoughts?
Not all together. It's fine. If you want to do it at the end, it's fine too. Any last minute takers, or I'm going to continue and then we'll talk at the end.
I have, if I may, I have one question, because you mentioned that most of the countries have already kind of played their cards in order to have supporting packages and so forth. Are there any countries though that were in better financial health, and is there kind of a ranking already made as to which country is going to exit stronger? Is that something that's been looked at in terms of recovery? Because, for example, Germany had a lot of their little golden nuggets, and they're using it. So are there other countries like that that are being ranked in terms of strengths?
Yeah. So what's happening right now, and you can see it in the lending market, that's really interesting right now. I'm involved in a startup company that is in this domain, and so I kind of had to learn it from the lending market. They pretty much stopped because the models pretty much all the models that everybody is using or has been using, they're scared to use them right now. So there was a bit of a pause. They're rethinking the models, but definitely some countries were more conservative than others. So there will be, I believe that country ratings will change. But some countries, of course, were more conservative. Others were not. The US was not as conservative with the financial market. And that's going to be something very interesting to look at. So what they've been doing right now on the country levels is a lot of countries, the countries that have the money, were kind of dumping the money into the economy. And they try to do it in a smart way, or we're going to invest, a certain money on this and that. But they pretty much didn't have really the time to decide what to spend on. So they're going to have to, at some point pretty soon, decide for each country, and it's going to be different, how much money they're going to have and how they want to spend that money to recover. Because they're going to have to deal with a lot of pressure, right? All industries or, services, they all want to be safe and helped by government. They're all saying, well, you started this, why don't you help us? Which is totally right. But So
just one question, if you don't mind. What about China?
Yeah, China is that's very interesting. That's a very interesting question. What about China? So on the one hand, China was first to walk into this, but their strategies for dealing with this were a little. They had more privilege than Western countries in the way they dealt with it, and their markets are different. The Asian countries, I'm going to open it to Asian, and not just to China, but Asian countries were better prepared, and you could see it on different levels. So it's going to be very interesting. I don't have a specific question about the Chinese financial system. If they played all their cards, I don't think so. I think they've got a couple of aces down their sleeve, but and it's not like we don't, like Western countries don't. Definitely they do, and they will. They're just going to have to work a little harder, or they're right now a lot of the market is not as scared on the financial side right now, because a lot of the long-term bonds and so on are until 2023, so they have some time. They're not stressed. It's corporate that is stressed right now, and we're going to talk about corporate. So let's talk about corporate right now, and so we're going to talk about a corporate recovery framework. So the framework is going to be based around opportunity management, because usually corporate, especially established corporate, is more about the threat management, less opportunity. Opportunity is left for marketing. This is going to be about opportunity. You got to be quick on your feet, and you got to look for all those things, goodies that we talked about in the other webinar. So we're going to make a few assumptions. During a crisis, not everybody can focus on opportunities. And what I'm saying here is that you have to have some kind of a governance plan to how you're going to deal with all this. And we're going to talk about the governance, just the slide. So the recovery governance model, what I'm proposing here is some form of a crisis and risk management task force that has all the right stakeholders, like you would do any task force. So it's not just countries that should have task force. It's also companies should acknowledge that they need a task force for this, and the task force should have all the right stakeholders from finance and marketing and all the BUs, and you have to have two delivery leads. One is for the current crises and one is for recovery, because when you're dealing with a crisis, they have to talk to each other, right? They have to coordinate things. So let's say for financials, you want to get rid of all the revolving debt, for example, because you're dealing with a crisis. Is that a good thing for recovery or not? Maybe yes, maybe not. You got to examine that. And you got to be focused. You have to have execution teams and communications. One of the things we've seen on a country level, and we're kind of translating it to corporate, is we saw Angela Merkel come out from the very beginning and talk very intelligently to the German people. And we've seen other countries as well. It's all about communication and keeping the lines of communication open. Your employees have to know what's going on. They can't be in the dark. They're scared. They're worried about their job. So they need to know what exactly they're expected to do, and so on. And all your support, you have to have support functions, and of course, BU points of contact for that. So that's a recovery governance model. It could look something like that. It could look something very different, but there needs to be a governance model. You have to acknowledge that you got to manage this. And companies are wonderful about using governance models. They're really good at it, usually. So let's talk a little bit about an opportunity sensing framework. What I put together here is kind of acknowledgement of this specific crisis. And let's start on the left with social economics. So this crisis evolved, it's a health crisis that we have an emerging risk, which is a social economic emerging risk. So we have to be mindful of that. Right now we're on Zoom. Nobody thought we'll be using Zoom so much before this crisis. And so what about all the hot trends that we have for social economics? Are these opportunities that we can use as a company? All the future of work buzz, all the things we were always talking about, all the consumer new behaviors. We were always talking about that, but really hesitant to do anything about that. So if remote work is something that could help you right now, so that's, or for permanently, or what other elements in future of work can help you, or what other things in consumer behaviors you were overlooking but need to look at right now. Another thing you should always consider: human nature, steady state. We are humans. There's some things that never change. So even though we're in a crisis, we're work-centric driven. We need a cause. There is, of course, globalization versus localization. All those things did not go away. So don't overlook them. And there may be opportunities there. Don't overlook and just go for hot trends. Don't just say because everybody uses Zoom right now, then that's what I'm going to do from now on. So that's the social economics part in this. The sector analysis. So look very maturely, and I could show you a lot about how to, what to look for in risk and sector analysis. So what's going on in your sector? Is it a really mature sector that needs to invest a lot of money just for making little improvements? So is that sector is sort of a problem? Are you getting to this crisis when your sector is in a pretty bad shape, like the energy sector, for example, or not? Are you in a really good sector? Maybe you're in AI, or I don't know what your sector is, that you just that your sector is booming. So what are your sectorial growth factors? Zero in on those. You got to understand your sector always, but definitely for opportunity sensing, there are a lot of efficiency opportunities in your sector right now, and you got to do a sector in depth. And the way I would do it is before and during the crisis, because a lot of things were going on before and maybe you wanted to overlook them. Just like on a personal level, the example I started out with, you were overlooking the fact that you were living beyond your means, but maybe you can't overlook that anymore. So look at what happened before and during the crisis. And what about your product or your service? You got to work on your keepers, got to work on a strategy for, these are my keepers, I'm going to make the most out of the opportunity for those. You're going to do a survive or perish analysis. It's going to be brutal, but it has to be smart and to the point. And what's new? What are you going to do that's new? And you're not going to know everything. And the last part is almost the most important part: unknown data sensing. You got to be on your toes and kind of develop the unknown data sensing framework. So what are your opportunity management common strategies? And you got to start thinking that way. You got to start thinking like an opportunities manager for a country level, for a corporate level, and for personal level. So strategies are one, exploit, and that is go all the way, make it happen, spend as much resources as possible. And countries have been doing it to fight, to fight the coronavirus. They said, we're going to go all out. We're going to do whatever it takes. Another strategy is enhance. We're going to go for it, but under cost benefit constraints. So if somebody comes up with a new product that's like super, looks like a great opportunity, we're going to only go for it if it makes sense. So we're not going to go crazy. Sharing is caring. The next one is collaborate with others to promote. So maybe you had a competitor up till now. Maybe it's time to start collaborating, or sharing your opportunities is actually a great way to make them happen. And accept, which is like, do nothing. It's too costly to try to do anything. I'm just going to try to see what's going on and just manage it by revisiting every once in a while. So always go back to your threat opportunity matrix and focus on don't lose sight of what's important on the focus area. And I'm going to let you kind of let that sink in a little bit before I move on to, that was the last one. Sorry about that. I'm just stopping my video for a second. Sorry about that. It was just getting really dark, so I had to get the light on. Okay, so having done that, let's go back to the corporate sensing slide, and let's start the discussion. So this time I would love to hear your opinion about the framework. Anything you'd like to add, any comments you have, any ideas for, let's start with corporate recovery and then go to country and personal. So do you want to have a round? I'll go maybe to the
I have a question again. Nikki, well, it has generally been acknowledged that companies with a female management have better results. Do you see any difference between a corporate with a female and a male CEO for this opportunity and risk management?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know. For the corporate level, I don't know. Maybe Helen, do you have studies that show how women CEOs are performing in companies? I think there are some studies that show that on general they're doing better, but
there's some studies on the market which have been done, but actually not for corporate, because if we compare what we have corporate, there are a lot of women managing corporates. But you can find some studies. I think Brennan Co made one on the market to explain the difference, but I think we have one or two in the two last year which have been done. But we don't have anyone done by Innov at the moment.
Yeah. The thing about these studies, I actually heard a claim about that, I think it was a few days ago, that says, well, the women that got to be, CEOs had to be so much more competent to begin with, just to get there, that it's not a fair comparison. So it's kind of like, I don't know if it's like comparing apples to oranges. in that sense. But we do have to take, it's an opportunity for us. Just the other day, I think it was on Fareed Zakaria's show, that he interviewed Madeleine Albright about it, and how women did on the country level risk management of this crisis. And they got, so there was a discussion about that and how women did great. So I think it's an opportunity for us to actually show our strength for corporate, and kind of say to everybody, well, we did so well on the country level, we could do corporate, you know, it's a no-brainer for us right now. So if we could be heads of state and we could do a great job, then maybe, not maybe, then we could do corporate for sure. Any other questions, remarks?
Lou, you had raised your hand for a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks, Veronique. Nikki, when you explain your governance model, and you say the importance and how key it is for a corporate to have this kind of governance, how do you adapt this in a startup model? As you know, based in the Bay Area, I'm more used right now to work with those kind of companies. All of them, they are struggling to see how they can recover, how they can see their business plans and strategies in the frame of this pandemic, but they don't have the means to build a governance that is that structure. Do you have some advices in how to mitigate those risks for smaller companies? Thanks.
Yeah, I think what you do is you make it leaner, of course, but what I find very useful is whenever there's a model that's for a large company and then it's a startup. So for startup, everybody does everything. You know, you're the CEO, you're the chief risk officer, and you're also the COO and the CFO, and so of course it's leaner, but you have to do opportunity sensing as well, and you have to acknowledge that you have to kind of, I would say, do the same but a diluted model. So I'm not saying this is necessarily the best model. You can have other models, but do some kind of a diluted model. But one thing you have to understand as a startup, the world has changed. So some things will stay the same and some things will change. And I would say you have to draw the line. I would almost draw a line between the two of those. And that would be the first thing I would identify, sorry, as a startup. In my ecosystem, what's likely to stay, perish, or reinvent itself? I hope that.
Can I just comment about the question? It's very common to use outsourcing for such a model. If you don't have enough capability or persons in the company itself, you can use an outsource, even for a lean time investment. But the fact of thinking around risk management and opportunities management way of thinking, this is the benefit to the companies. So it's really investing some time in the risk management and the opportunity that can be managed by the CEO or CFO, even if you don't have a risk manager in the company. Thanks.
In some ways, startups are one big opportunity sensing framework. That's all they are. So in some ways, they're better prepared for that. They're lean usually to begin with. And they're all about opportunity sensing, and they move fast from one thing to the other. It's actually the big ships. And yesterday, I actually heard a lecture about, well, we were able to pull out PetSmart which is, you know, one of a retail giant, in good times, are we going to be able to pull out the PetSmarts of the world in these times? So the larger ships are having actually more problems navigating than a startup that's all about opportunity sensing. And I on a personal note, for a startup, a colleague of mine, it was a few months ago, I think a month before the crisis started, wanted me to get involved in a startup he was doing, and it seemed he was doing very well. And he got purchase orders, I'm sorry, it wasn't purchase orders, it was intent for purchase or whatever that's called, from large companies, and everything was going great. And then the crisis happened, and they pulled out. What he did is he changed direction. I think it took him like 3 days to close up shop and totally change direction, because startups in that way are better positioned, because they're all about, that's what they are, opportunity sensing frameworks. The larger, more traditional companies, they wouldn't sometimes know an opportunity sensing framework, you know, if it hit them on the head. So they're going to be in for quite a shock if they're going to be using the same kind of techniques and strategies to get out of this one. That's going to be quite a hit. Anybody else? Question?
I have more of a specific question, Nikki, on what you call unknown data sensing. Is that something similar that is called weak signal, or could you give an example of what you would qualify as an unknown data sensing?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's very similar to what
weak signal.
What you said, but I would give an example. First of all, acknowledging that I don't have all the knowledge. I identify maybe things that are not directly related to me, but are in the areas that can impact me. And I start sensing what's going on in those domains. I kind of say to myself, for my business model, I'm going to be on the lookout for, let's say I'm an airline. So right now I'm all about whatever, you know, trying to save the tourism business, which is going to be very, very hard. Or what am I to do? I don't know what to do. But maybe my data sensing needs to be right now on the Boeings of the world, on the Airbuses, on the energy markets. Maybe there are opportunities. Maybe I know how to store energy. So maybe right now, if energy companies are looking for somebody to take it, you know, they need storage, stuff like that. I don't know everything. I know enough about elements in my ecosystem to be on the lookout. And I know that I'm impacted by global trends. So I have to, if, for example, I'm reliant on import for my business, and I know that's a sensitive area right now, I have to do some data sensing on that. So it would be I would say anything that's unknown and comes on my radar, I start to examine, and I have triggers. Hopefully, I have some triggers that would trigger me to act on information. Does that kind of answer the question, or?
Yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah. No, you don't know what you don't know, actually, and you need to understand that. No, get it. Thank you, Nikki.
First of all, you got to acknowledge that you don't know everything. A lot of the larger companies, and I will not say which company that I used to work for. It was a very long time ago, but my first day on the job, my boss said, "We're doing everything perfectly." all we need to do is just don't mess it up. And I looked at him and I said, well, I have no idea. Like in my mind, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Because if you're saying that, then this is not a really good company to work for. Because not just on a personal level, but just saying that you know everything means that you really don't know a lot. So, okay. Anybody else has anything to say and share about corporate? What about countries? I'm going to ask do you think there's a lot of groupthink when it comes to country right now, that they're all kind of feeding off each other and you're scared to do things differently, even if it's not the right thing for your country? Anybody? I'm going to say yes. There's a lot of groupthink right now. And I do encourage you to look at Didier Sorent's studies. He's a professor from Zurich. I follow his work. He's kind of a risk genius. I tend to follow his work a lot. Very interesting stuff. I'm really scared of that aspect. I'm really scared that weaker countries are going to go into a lot of trouble if they do the same things that stronger companies do, and they're not going to be able to recover as well. And so that's on the country level. Anybody has anything to share on a personal? Have you thought of your personal risk management? Is it something that crossed your mind during this time or not really?
Nikki, more on the country level, have you observed how the EU is currently operating? And if yes, what's your view on how the EU as a group of countries is handling the crisis on the recovery aspect, especially? Any comment there?
Well, I have to say I don't know enough about it, but I do know there is a difference that really is very clear, that the EU is going to have to take good notice of the northern EU countries and the southern EU members. And I'm sure, the EU was aware of that before. It's not anything new, but the differences in handling the crises and how and I think there's going to be there should be a lot of thinking about how countries helped each other. Did they help each other? Are they going to recover? I'm going to go to this slide. Are they going to share their recovery strategies? Are they going to collaborate? Or are they going to exploit each country for itself, whatever it could get its hands on? So EU went for, there's a lot of, it was never tested during a crisis. The EU model was never stress tested like this time, and it's going to be stress tested. We thought Brexit was a stress test for EU, but I think now that's going to be a really huge stress test for that, and it's going to be very interesting how the play is going to be between China and the U.S. for sure. Going to be something that everyone's going to be taking paying a lot of attention to that. What do you think about the EU, Veronique?
That's the question. I think, like many European citizens, we observe, and I think citizens are currently preoccupied by the today and what next for me. But I hope that the EU get their act together for a recovery strategy, especially when you are facing, as usual, the US and China. I hope there is a collective strategy, but I don't know. We can only observe for the time being.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because if there's not going to be groupthink on recovery for the different countries, then it's going to be very interesting how this will all play out on a local and global level. And what about personal? I know I'm pushing for this, and I've been asking about this have you thought about what's going to be your personal risk strategy to deal with the crisis? Did you find yourself developing or not developing a strategy for recovery? Not all together now. I'll explain about, I'll give an example about myself and on the personal side. So I did find myself thinking about, you know, how are things going to be in the next month for me? For me and my family, how are things going to be in the next maybe half a year, and for the long run? And I do use this opportunity because risk management is suddenly on everybody's radar. You know, a lot of times us risk managers okay, yeah, you know, just another report for the board, and all of a sudden, you know, everybody wants to hear from us. So I'm going to keep reminding everybody that maybe part of the reason they did crisis management is because they didn't do very thoughtful, you know, risk management process to begin with. Because you could definitely see in Asia where they had MERS experience, they were more prepared and they had a strategy. They you know, they went all in and knew what to do. And you know, crisis management has a hero. Risk management often does not have a hero. If nothing happens, then you can't save the day, and you don't get credit if nothing happens. But if you get to save the day and be the crisis hero, then you know, leaders love to be heroes, and it's something that we do have to consider. And even for our management in companies, right? A lot of times, how many times have you had a manager, a senior manager, not want to do something just because a predecessor did the same thing or wanted to change or make her or his mark? And women tend to be less motivated by ego. If we're talking about pink innovation, then definitely we tend to be less motivated by ego, but we still are motivated by ego. And crises, it's really, if you save the day in your company or your country, you're considered a hero. And if you just do risk management, that's kind of hard and it takes years, but then it does make us think, right? We're all paying a hefty price for maybe lack of risk management. And I will leave you with that sad or happy note. I don't know, but hopeful. There will be a recovery. And maybe we could use some innovative strategies for that. And please feel free to reach out and email me any questions you have. And that's it. Do you have any other questions, or are you all depressed or happy, or raise your hands if you're happy?
It's very quiet attendees.
You have a reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can put a happy clap, or so whatever you want. You don't have a sad option though, so you can only be happy.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if you're. I stopped the presentation. I'm trying to see if you guys are. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else, or it's a wrap?
Any question for Nikki on this presentation? Everybody know how they're going to manage their recovery?
I have a question. So
Okay.
is because we split between country and personal, and clearly regarding countries, I think that is very related, both of them, because discussing with people from other countries, I think that there is a big difference, for example, between UE and countries that have a large informal economy. And do you think that the recovery will be smooth in this case, or do you think that there is a risk that this pandemic can move to internal warfare, for example? Or...
That's a really good question. And that's exactly the kind of groupthink that countries have to avoid right now. And I'll give the example of the United States, because we always call, we always think, and then I'll go back to Europe. We always think of the United States as, especially out of the United States, as one thing, right? United States. But it's actually governors in different in different states doing their own thing and managing the crises. And so your question is right to the point. What happens, what would have happened, or what could happen potentially if one state has a lot of ventilators and doesn't share, or if one state or some states default and others don't, then what happens then? Then if maybe I'm controlling the water, the water for California, and California sits on, its own thing and says, well, I don't care, Arizona. Well, I say, well, you know what? I control the Colorado River, so let's see you now. So definitely, it's going to be very interesting. There has to be sharing, because you can't be a part of something and just think about yourself. So going back to Europe is going to be the same thing, right? The stronger, and we've seen Germany pull out Greece out of trouble time and time again. And well, they always say, they make a serious face, but they understand it's better for them to do that than lose Greece, and because that would start, domino effect. Then definitely we saw some collaboration, but I think the first thing to look out for is going to be when vaccines come out. Is it going to be shared or not? That's going to be very, very interesting to see. How are countries going to share, and we need each other we need that the other country will recover, because some say, well, China just wants everybody, maybe not to recover, but keep remembering China has to sell its good to someone. And if other countries don't have the money, then they're going to suffer as well, because we're all interconnected. We can't do it alone. So, but I'm sure each country has to play its strength, but in some way, and do the lessons learned for recovery. What happened when we needed food? Did we have enough food or not? And definitely EU is going to be very, very interesting to see, because now everybody's just been busy, you know, doing their own thing, or maybe helping out with the sick, or but what do you think about the EU, Maria?
I think the EU is, at least the countries in EU are very well organized, okay, and are supporting the system. The difference between, for me, for UE countries and other countries is that we have very good organizations, okay, that are sustaining. Okay, they are the government, the decisions, but you have system to sustain. Okay, so this is very useful. But there are a lot of countries where today they are not system to sustain government decisions, and I think that this is the big gap. And when we put that in the personal life, the question from people are completely different. You know, it's my experience sharing with people working in different places of the world is that the fears are completely different regarding the recovery, you know. So for that was my questions, to understand if you have analyzed that. That is my but this remains. I like what you say, that you are talking about domino effect. We are talking about lessons learned from recovery. I think that we need to see. I don't know.
Well, definitely. Sorry.
My name is Robin. I had a question. First of all, just a comment. So I'm based in France, but all my family is in the UK. And my take on kind of the European countries and their kind of risk management, I'm actually surprised that there's countries that have made quite different decisions compared to others. Some which come across maybe a bit more complacent in terms of the risk, who have imposed less strict strategies on risk management, for example. And I suppose, having been in the EU for so long, I would have expected more of a united kind of decision-making process, whereas I feel that some countries have done quite different things in terms of risk management to others, and that's something that has actually surprised me. It's more of the Northern European countries that have kind of kept more businesses open, for example, less stringent rules in terms of going outside, etc. And they've tried to keep the businesses going. Whereas perhaps more the Southern European countries have been more strict. A large difference between France and the UK, for example, is that in France we have, we're prohibited to go outside, we can still work from home, etc. But in the UK, it's more based on a trust system. So they allow people to still go to the office as long as they do a more of a personal risk management, as opposed to kind of an imposed risk management. So that's something that's surprised me. So in addition to my comment, I had a question. And my question is, what is your thoughts on how transparent governments are being for countries in terms of the weighing up of risk management, in terms of the risk financially to restarting businesses, etc., during such a crisis, and then the risk associated to perhaps the virus coming back because they've opened up too quickly, for example, and then having a kind of a second wave of crisis. Do you think that some countries are being not transparent enough about this risk management strategy of them perhaps opening up a bit sooner because they're trying to manage the risk of the financial crisis, but they're balancing it against the health risk? What is your take on that?
My take on that is that not all countries have established the governance model. The governance model that I showed for corporate There's actually, I'd say, a similar type of governance for country. And what they did, not all countries established a task force or a body that's supposed to consider the trade-offs and to have a unified risk management, because what they have not been transparent, I think none of the countries have been transparent about mortality from emerging risk from a financial crisis. Because what happens is, if you could imagine a circular kind of motion going, you got a health risk, it's leading to an emerging financial risk, then leading to another health risk. People, who are not being, poverty kills people. People die from poverty. So in that regard, I don't think they actually, it's not that they're not being transparent. I think they have not done the full risk analysis of the full circle. Most countries, I don't know of a country that did the entire thing. Now, what a really amazing example you gave for the Northern European countries that are actually riskier than they're taking on more risk than the Southern European countries. There are certain models that show they're more prone because of the weather, but they still decided to manage that trade-off. So it goes into culture. It goes into cultural values that also it's all that with transparencies, right? Different countries, citizens expect different levels of transparency and trust. And you can see that in the UK, there's this dialogue of, we'll tell you, maybe a more mature conversation, right? Of, we'll tell you what expected from you. And then, but we do give you some kind of flexibility. So I think in terms of, to summarize, I don't think there's much of, that they're trying to hide things from us. They're trying not to be transparent. I'm talking about most countries. I think we're giving them a little too much credit that they actually know how to recover. What they just did financially, they just dumped money and hoping, to ease pressure, to ease social pressure, because when you're a country, the last thing you want is people to go on the street on strikes and say, I've got nothing to eat, or I don't have a job to go to. There's a 25% unemployment rate. Because what happens is to leaders, and you can look at history, they don't get reelected usually after major crises. That's just a fact, that's just a statistical analysis of history. So they're super scared right now. So they're struggling, and I believe they're doing actually the best they can. Does that make sense, Robin?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's true. I think a lot of what you said about the culture driving how governments impose sanctions is one of the main driving forces. Knowing how people will respond and respect certain rules, and whether they are required to impose them or not in terms of risk management, is one of the main reasons that in Europe, I think that we have such large discrepancies in how the crisis has been managed across Europe, even though we're a union. So that's been interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, but unions by definition, they don't have there should be some diversity. That's what's wonderful about unions. It's not all the same. That's the beauty of it.
Thank you for all this question. I think that the time is over. Thank you very much, Nikki, for this presentation. Thank you for the interactive animation that you have done. Thank you everybody for being connected. I hope that this webinar answer most of your questions. I'm sure you will have others anyway, so feel free to contact Nikki directly if you have any comment or question to share. And thank you for being here. Thank you for this webinar, and hope it was a nice meeting for you too. Thank you again, Nikki.
Thank you so much, Helene and Veronique.
You're welcome. Very happy to have you tonight.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
And Helene, you will distribute the replay, right, of the webinar?
Yes. We will send the webinar to all of this, so you can have the replay and share around you. It will be on Pink Innov's website.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye all. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Bye.